our first speaker. It's Dr. Ean Bett. He comes from my neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. So we are in the cold area over here, 20 degrees or so. And that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. Dr. Bett is a family practice physician who very widely traveled all across the world and was inspired by looking at the workings and all the healthcare systems across the world. And that is one of the reasons why he believes that AI is extremely important and has worked in this field. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Bett. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for that generous interview. Thank you to the audience who's here, and certainly thank you to InnovatorMD for allowing me to speak on one of my passions. Definitely technology is a key to us getting back to the bedside in medicine. And I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts, some of the things I've seen, some of the things I've done, and hopefully kind of set up the rest of the speakers for this morning and for the conference to have a really dynamic discussion. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we will get going here. So, people able to see the screen?
Yes.
People, okay, great.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so again, I'm a family medicine physician here in Columbus, Ohio. I started a small company that I titled Archimedes International to work on some projects on my own or to collaborate with other individuals. And our tagline is "The Imagined Fuels Reality." But what I'm talking about this morning is AI, and that is a part of Archimedes International, but it's not its entirety. Now, I did a quick exercise a few weeks ago on LinkedIn and asked some of you who are actually in attendance and others that I'm connected with about their thoughts on AI. So AI is what I asked to share. And here are some of the responses that I got: that it's the next renaissance, that it's the new en vogue tool. I think Dr. Chetapalli shared that it is knowing, which I think is very deep, just one word, but very considerate about what we're trying to do with technology. And then this last one here, John Dayton, who I think people might be familiar with, is one that I really liked, maybe because it hits home to me, which is that AI, the technologies that make up AI, so the algorithms, the virtual reality, the augmented reality, all of these things that we're working on to get us back to the bedside is a chance to improve healthcare through interoperable data, facilitating improved health and increased time with patients. And that's definitely the perspective I've taken in my own research and projects, is getting back to the bedside so that we have more time with patients, more time to do the things that we enjoy doing, which is healing, and really using technology to make us better at doing that. That's really my thrust. So for anyone who hasn't met me before, I do like to poke the bear a little bit. So I say that AI is BS. Now, not what you're thinking, because I actually really enjoy technology, but what I think AI is basic science. This is where we need to get to with these technologies that we put under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. As physicians, as innovators, as clinicians, as educators, we need to be using these technologies that we see on mainstream media or at this conference and get them into medical education very early. There are some organizations like the American Board of Artificial Intelligence in Medicine. I think Anthony Chang has presented here, and I think Arlen Myers said hi to everybody in the chat already. Some of the leaders there have really said what we need to be doing is getting this into the hands of medical students early. And so I've taken their challenge and worked on that myself. So AI is BS, but remember, BS is basic science. And that's where I think we need to get to when we think about these technologies. It just needs to become a part of the practice of medicine as early as possible. Now, I do have some disclosures, and I do like to start the session off. Hopefully people are excited, but hopefully people can have a laugh as well. My only disclosure is that I'm not a cat. If you don't get this joke, I apologize. If you do, I hope you enjoy it. A few other things here. Some of the things I've worked on in the past or currently working on, just for reference, and my current academic appointment, just so that people are aware, here at Grant Medical Center in the Family Medicine Residency. Again, a few of the other projects I've worked on or working on currently. Now, This is my personal ethos for AI. It's the opportunity for physicians to leverage technology in the clinical encounter for improved patient outcomes and patient-physician collaboration. And this is really coming out of work that I've done with some medical students that I'll give a shout out to at the end, looking about how we use AI, the machine-based learning tools, video, natural language processing to get us back to the bedside as much as possible. Now, I'll also give some credit to an organization that some people might be familiar with, which is the Stanford University Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. Again, I mentioned ABAIM. I think this is a great reference, as well as the ABAIM for those that aren't familiar with the space of artificial intelligence and what it's going to do in medicine. What I'd like to talk to you all about are some of the, I think, really critical pieces of research that have been done in this space, which some you may be familiar with, others you may not have heard of, but I do provide these links here that I want people, if they're so motivated, to take a few minutes to read one or two of these, because this is where the passion comes from. For those of us that are interested in utilizing technology and artificial intelligence, and the one that I have pinned at my desk and I share with all the students is this piece by Dr. Obermeyer and Dr. Lee. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's Lost in Thought, the Limits of the Human Mind and the Future of Medicine. What they have said here is we've done a terrific job over the years, over the centuries, improving our craft as physicians, collaborating with one another, but we have learned that there's so much to learn and it's impossible for any one person to know everything. And that's really why we need to be using technology and AI to improve our own skills, to work with patients in a different way. And this piece here really highlights that it's not about us being the best individually. It's about us being the best we can be utilizing this technology. And I'll highlight another more recent piece on that idea. Next is one that fast forwards us just to this past year, 2021. And this looked at what I think is a fascinating idea of how we actually get AI into the basic sciences and into the day-to-day existence of practice, which is this piece, the Clinical Artificial Intelligence Department, a prerequisite for success. And the authors did a really nice job. Again, only a 2-page article, but this infographic shows you. And for those that are clinicians, they know that that current situation there is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. If you want data, you got to either get it yourself, you got to tell someone how to get it for you. You've got to, it's like herding cats, right? I may not be a cat, but getting this together is like herding cats, which is an impossibility. And where we need to get to is what they've shown here in B, which is actually creating a medical AI department, streamlining all of these resources, all of these teams, all of the clinical experience into one set of individuals who can help us perform better clinically. And so I think this is a really nice piece, an article to motivate people who are in academics or know people that are in academics to really start pushing the envelope here for this type of idea. Next, two that I'll just point out is some work calling for this knowledge of artificial intelligence in medicine getting into the basic sciences, like I said. So here's one piece just talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I have the opportunity to mentor like many of us do, and the students that I'm mentoring currently are at least a decade or 15 years younger than me. They've grown up with this technology, and it's even more disappointing to them that we're not using it at the bedside than it is for me. And so they are craving this knowledge from leadership like ourselves to be integrated into their medical education. So this article here highlights that. And then this is another one that actually looked, what are we doing? Are we doing anything? Could we be doing more? And I think we're really at the precipice of making AI basic science in our training and in our practice. The next is, for those of you that don't want to dive into the data too much, but want a relatively good read, Drs. Cadario, Langoni, and Morwedge actually did a 2-for-1 here. I have both of the hyperlinks. One is to this academic article, which looks at understanding and explaining and utilizing medical artificial intelligence. But the hyperlink below it is to a Harvard Business Review article where they really talk about why this is important and how we actually get there without breaking our backs, which is, for those of us that have been patients and are clinicians, we know that the process is long, that there's a lot of thought that goes into making a medical decision that seems fairly simple, but a lot has gone into it. What they did is they asked a lot of people, thousands of people, and said, what do you think goes into making this medical decision? It's a big black box. And while that's a little bit scary for us as clinicians and innovators and educators, it actually gives us a lot of leeway to know that we can use these tools once we develop them to help us make decisions, and that people will actually not be resistant. It'll be the example I give, and I may have stolen it from somebody who's on this conference. I can't take credit for it. But it'll one day in the not too distant future be like walking into a room without a stethoscope and putting your ear to someone's chest to listen to their lungs. And they'll have seen another doctor or someone else at some point in time, and they'll say, you know, Dr. Bett, what are you doing? And I'll say, oh, I'm just listening. That is what it'll be like when we're not using an AI tool in real time in the not too distant future. And it's not because it's impossible to do. It's because for the most part, people aren't too cognizant unless they're clinicians of what goes into making our decisions. So if we can develop these tools effectively, we can use them relatively effectively. And some of my own research has talked about that. Now, I know Uli's going to have a great big grin on his face because I'm sharing this article and this work that he did, but I really think this is, you know, Dr. Chetapalli did a great job with his colleagues here, but I really do think it's important for those of you that haven't seen this. This is where we can get to with AI as a medical decision-making tool, where we take information that's been collected from multiple different sites, maybe even across not just different institutions, but different states, maybe even different countries, and help us make the best possible decision for that person right there in front of us. And what they demonstrated here in the CREST network with this paper is that they could collect data to help them make the right decision for that person sitting in front of them, coming into the emergency department with chest pain. Where I want us to be thoughtful about for the rest of this conference and moving forward is this could be the same thing for something like a UTI, which might seem pretty simple, straightforward for those of us clinicians. But what if we have more data, better data to make better decisions for that one person in front of us? This can be extrapolated, I think, across many medical decisions. And that's why I think this idea, which they work so hard to create and then execute and show that it actually worked, is so important for us as clinicians, as educators, and as innovators. So not just to make Dr. Chetapalli feel good, but I do think this is really cutting edge and where we should be headed. Now, I try not to be too much of a self-promoter, but I think one of the reasons why I ended up here starting off today is because I did have a piece that I published in Medium a few years back. I published it again on LinkedIn and got some good feedback. So I'm just sharing it here about where I think we can get to as a future of medicine. And it is, you know, encompassing some of the ideas that these other authors in their own research have shared, where we can be as adept as possible. One of the reasons I enjoy being a family medicine physician is because I get to see all sorts of different people, different lifespan points in time, with all sorts of different complaints or multiple complaints at the same time. It is extremely challenging. And I would like to have a tool that helps me make as good of a decision as possible. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this piece. Now, Piyush gave us a great segue here, and I'm a big fan of literature. And I think this quote from Hermann Hesse from Steppenwolf is really apropos for where we are in 2022. We're in the midst of the COVID pandemic still, you know, about to start year 3, actually. And we have all this technology that we're utilizing in our day-to-day life, and we haven't really started using it effectively in the clinical encounters. I think this group of innovators and educators, people who are open-minded and creative, can really start pushing the envelope. And I hope to play a role in that in whatever way that I can. And I just really like this quote, and I feel like this is where we are in January of 2022. And another quote that I think people will be familiar with is that for those of us who are clinicians, we do what we do because of that person in front of us, and using technology will allow us to just listen to the patient again, to use natural language processing, machine-based learning algorithms, AR or virtual reality, to just interact, use our brain, and use the technology to help us make medical decisions. A little bit just to finish up here, a hyperlink to my website. For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to listen, I do have a podcast that I started during the pandemic like everybody else. Dr. Chetapalli was so kind, and I recently had another guest on from Bangalore, India, Monica Sonu, who talked about global health innovations. My mission, other than just caring for patients, which I was just doing earlier and I'll go back to doing here shortly, is to make sure that those of us who are interested in pushing the envelope, whether it's as an educator, an innovator, a creator, have an opportunity to share these ideas, not just in academic papers, which I love reading, but I actually really like talking to people too. And so I've done that through the podcast. Feel free to reach out to me if you have an idea that you want to talk about and get out to your colleagues other than through great events like this. So I appreciate, again, the time. Do want to give thanks to everybody who's here in attendance, and also a shout out to the students who have allowed me to mentor them in our own research project, Ty Johnson, Tasia Reddy, and Tim Frohmeyer. Thank you so much. On to the next.
Thank you, Ian. That got us started with all the background context that we needed. So you set us up very well. Thank you. And surely we'll be very interested in listening to the podcast and subscribing to that. With that, we're going to move.